These engineers put radar collision avoidance in a 1959 car, 60 years before Tesla. How is that even possible? In January 1955, visitors to the Chicago Auto Show witnessed something that looked like it had swum up from the ocean depths. The Lincoln Futura sat gleaming under the show lights, its frost blue paint shimmering with an otherworldly quality. What they didn't know was that the paint actually contained ground-up fish scales, applied by Italian craftsmen who had just spent 3 months hand-building what would become the most expensive concept car of the decade. The Futura began life in the mind of Bill Schmidt, Lincoln Mercury's chief stylist. Schmidt had started at Ford Trade School in 1940, worked on B-24 bombers during the war, and by 1947 had become Lincoln's lead designer. But it was a diving vacation in the Bahamas that sparked his most famous creation. Swimming in crystal-clear waters, Schmidt encountered a mako shark and manta ray. He became mesmerized by their fluid movements and the way light shimmered across their skin as they glided through the water. Back in Detroit, Schmidt worked with body development specialist John Najjar to translate that underwater experience into automotive form. They created a design that captured what Schmidt called the shimmer of underwater fish. The process involved multiple models. First, a 3/8 scale study, then a full-scale clay model, and finally a plaster model that would guide the Italian craftsmen. Ford made a decision that seems insane by today's standards. Instead of building the car in-house, they shipped the designs to Carrozzeria Ghia in Turin, Italy, with a budget of $250,000, equivalent to $2.9 million today. For context, you could buy 50 brand-new Chevrolets for the same money. The Italian artisans at Ghia spent 3 months in late 1954 hand-forming every panel, creating a vehicle that bore no resemblance to anything on Earth's roads. The finished Futura was extraordinary in every detail. It measured 227 inches long, but stood just 52.8 inches tall, lower than most people's waists. The double-dome clear plexiglass canopy gave it an aircraft cockpit appearance, while massive outward canted tail fins made it look ready for flight. The headlights were housed in exaggerated pods that hooded the lights like sleepy eyes, while the paint job required special techniques using actual fish scales to achieve that otherworldly shimmer. Inside, the Futura was equally bizarre. Aircraft-style gauges dominated the cockpit, with the speedometer mounted directly in the center of the steering wheel. A compass sat at the center of the instrument panel, as if drivers might need celestial navigation. Most unusually, the controls were hidden behind roll-top desk-style aluminum doors. When closed, the instrument panel looked completely clean and unadorned, like something from a spaceship. The technical specifications were as extreme as the styling. Built on an experimental Continental Mark II chassis with a 126-inch wheelbase, the Futura packed a 300 to 330 horsepower Lincoln V8 engine. Sources vary on the exact output, with some citing a 368 cubic inch displacement. Power went through a push-button automatic turbo drive transmission, itself cutting-edge technology for 1955. The push-button controls were mounted in that hidden roll-top console, adding to the car's space-age mystique. What made the Futura so weird for its time wasn't just its looks. It was completely impractical. The ultra-low height made entry and exit nearly impossible for normal-sized humans. The bubble canopy would have been unbearably hot in summer sun and would fog up in cold weather. The hidden controls meant drivers had to open a panel just to adjust the radio or transmission. The fish-scale paint job required special maintenance techniques that no normal service station could handle. Yet the public absolutely loved it. The Futura toured the auto show circuit throughout 1955, drawing massive crowds wherever it appeared. Automotive publications couldn't get enough of it. The headlight and tail fin motifs were so popular that Lincoln immediately incorporated modified versions into their 1956 and 1957 production models. The car represented everything Americans wanted to believe about their technological future, that it would be beautiful, sophisticated, and completely different from the past. The Futura's story didn't end with the auto show circuit. In 1959, Hollywood customizer George Barris purchased the car from Ford, probably for far less than its construction cost. 7 years later, Barris transformed the Futura into the iconic Batmobile for the 1966 to 1968 Batman television series. That transformation gave the Lincoln concept car lasting pop culture immortality that continues today. One of the most expensive concept cars ever built became one of the most famous television cars ever created. Looking back, the Futura perfectly captured the optimism and excess of 1950s America. It was a time when engineers believed they could build anything, when designers weren't constrained by practical concerns, and when the public expected the future to look dramatically different from the present. The car made no practical sense whatsoever, but it didn't need to. It was pure automotive fantasy made real, a glimpse of a future that never came to pass but captured imaginations for generations. In 1958, most Americans viewed traffic safety as a personal responsibility rather than an engineering problem. Seatbelts were rare, crumple zones didn't exist, and automotive safety features were basically limited to brakes and headlights. Into this environment came Walter C. Jerome of Worcester, Massachusetts, with a vehicle so bizarre and safety-focused that it looked like it had landed from another planet. The Sir Vival was his answer to rising highway fatalities, and it made absolutely no sense to anyone who saw it. Walter Jerome was not your typical backyard inventor. He held a degree from Northeastern University's College of Engineering and had serious credentials, but he was also deeply troubled by what he saw as the automotive industry's complete disregard for driver safety. Jerome believed that car manufacturers had zero concern for driver safety and were more interested in style than survival. His solution was to build the safest car imaginable, regardless of how strange it looked or how much it cost. Jerome started with a 1948 Hudson Commodore that he purchased from Bellingham Auto Sales. What he created over the next 10 years bore no resemblance to that original Hudson. The Sir Vival became a two-part articulated vehicle that looked like someone had crossed a submarine periscope with a carnival ride. The most distinctive feature was its segmented construction. The engine and front wheels occupied a separate section from the passenger cabin, connected by an articulated joint system that allowed the two sections to pivot around a vertical axis. The engineering theory behind this bizarre design was actually sound. In a collision, Jerome reasoned, the two sections would articulate around the joint to absorb shock and redirect impact forces. The front section would pivot away from the passenger cabin, potentially saving lives. The front wheels didn't turn conventionally either. The entire front end pivoted for steering, which Jerome claimed created an always-in-alignment system that eliminated steering problems. But the Sir Vival's most visually striking feature was its driver turret system. The driver sat in an elevated position 3 feet above the rear passengers, enclosed in a 360-degree cylindrical glass dome. This turret measured 1 foot high with a 4-foot circumference and provided complete visibility in all directions. Instead of conventional windshield wipers, Jerome designed a unique cleaning system where felt wipers were mounted on the dome frame edges. The entire dome rotated for continuous cleaning, eliminating the need for traditional wipers. The safety features Jerome packed into the Sir Vival were decades ahead of their time. Seatbelts were standard throughout the cabin, long before they became legally required. Built-in roll cages and roll bars protected occupants in rollover accidents. The entire cabin interior was padded to prevent injury during impacts. Sliding side doors made entry and exit easier and safer than conventional hinged doors. Wraparound rubber bumpers provided protection during low-speed collisions. Side lights improved visibility to other drivers. Many of these features wouldn't become standard in production cars until the 1970s and 1980s. Jerome created the Hollow Boring Corporation of Worcester to handle marketing and hoped to produce 10 to 12 Sir Vivals annually at a retail price of $10,000 each. To put that in perspective, a top-of-the-line Cadillac Series 62 cost around $5,000 in 1958. Jerome was essentially asking customers to pay double the price of a luxury car for a vehicle that looked like a science fiction movie prop and handled unlike anything on the road. The articulated steering system created a driving experience unlike any conventional automobile. When the driver turned the wheel, The entire front section pivoted, creating a sensation that contemporary reports described as unique and unusual. The elevated driving position in the turret provided excellent visibility, but also meant the driver felt completely separated from the road and passengers. The rotating dome cleaning system created a constant, low-level mechanical sound that reminded passengers they were in an experimental vehicle. Media coverage of the Sir Vival was extensive and generally positive about its safety innovations, even while acknowledging its commercial impracticality. Mechanics Illustrated featured the car on its cover, while Life magazine ran a full-feature story. Motor Trend and other automotive publications covered the vehicle extensively. International media picked up the story, and the Sir Vival appeared in foreign publications across Europe and Asia. The car was eventually displayed at the 1964-65 New York World's Fair, giving it exposure to millions of visitors. Despite all the publicity and innovative safety features, the Sir Vival never found commercial success. The combination of its extreme price, bizarre appearance, and unconventional driving characteristics made it impossible to market to mainstream consumers. Jerome never secured the funding necessary to begin production, and the prototype remained the only Sir Vival ever built. The car represented innovative thinking that was simply too advanced and too unusual for market acceptance. What made the Sir Vival so weird wasn't just its appearance. It was the radical departure from conventional automotive thinking. While other manufacturers focused on style, power, and comfort, Jerome prioritized safety above all other considerations. The articulated chassis was unprecedented in automotive history. The elevated driving position was unlike anything drivers had experienced. The unconventional steering mechanism required learning entirely new driving techniques. The price point put it out of reach for most consumers, while the appearance guaranteed attention wherever it went. February 21st, 1959, marked the grand opening of Daytona International Speedway, America's newest and most modern racing facility. The star of the opening ceremonies wasn't a race car, but a Cadillac concept that looked like it had rolled off a rocket ship assembly line. The Cyclone XP74 was Harley Earl's final dream car before retiring as General Motors' legendary design chief, and it represented the absolute peak of American automotive futurism. It also made absolutely no practical sense for actual driving. Harley Earl had revolutionized automotive design since joining GM in 1927. He introduced the concept car program, created the tailfin craze, and established the space age aesthetic that defined American cars in the 1950s. The Cyclone was his ultimate statement, a vehicle that pushed every futuristic concept to its absolute extreme. If Americans wanted cars that looked like rocket ships, Earl would give them a rocket ship with wheels. The Cyclone started as a 1959 Cadillac Series 62 convertible, but Earl's team transformed it into something completely alien. The wheelbase was shortened to 104 inches, making it more maneuverable than the standard Cadillac. The final length measured approximately 197 inches, while the total weight reached 2,100 kilograms, or 4,630 pounds. Under the hood sat a 325 horsepower, 6,388 cc V8 engine connected to a 3-speed hydromatic automatic transmission with a 2-speed differential, providing 6 forward speeds total. But the Cyclone's mechanical specifications were ordinary compared to its revolutionary features. The most striking element was its radar nose cone system. Twin cone-shaped protrusions called dagmars jutted from the front of the car, each containing radar antennae that scanned the highway ahead. This crash avoidance system warned drivers of obstacles through both audible signals and warning lights. The radar measured distance to objects and calculated stopping distances in feet, displaying the information to the driver. This represented early autonomous vehicle technology concepts that wouldn't become practical for another 50 years. The Cyclone's most prominent visual feature was its bubble canopy system. When rain was detected, a one-piece bubble top automatically deployed from its storage position behind the cabin. The canopy featured silver coating for UV protection and provided 360-degree vision when in use. When not needed, it stowed under a rear clamshell and rested on an airbag to prevent damage. Automatic climate control managed interior temperature when the canopy was deployed, ensuring occupant comfort regardless of weather conditions. Entry into the Cyclone required patience and planning. Electric sliding doors moved outward 3 inches, then slid backward on ball bearings, eliminating the space requirements of conventional swinging doors. Once the unusual entry sequence was complete, occupants found themselves in an aircraft-inspired cockpit with jet fighter styling cues throughout. When the canopy was closed, a two-way communication system allowed occupants to speak with people outside without opening the bubble. Every detail of the Cyclone screamed space-age excess. The exhaust system was positioned behind the nose cone, ahead of the front wheels, creating a jet engine appearance. Hidden headlights above the grille could extend when needed. Small panels in the doors allowed toll payment without opening windows or doors. The taillights were styled to look like jet exhaust, while small wing elements influenced later production car designs. Mile-high tail fins completed the rocket ship aesthetic. The Cyclone's technological features would have been impressive in any era, but in 1959 they bordered on science fiction. The radar system required complex electronics and signal processing capabilities that barely existed. The automatic rain-sensing canopy deployment used weather detection technology decades ahead of its time. The climate control system had to manage temperature and humidity inside a greenhouse-like bubble canopy. The electric sliding doors required precision engineering to operate smoothly and safely. What made the Cyclone completely impractical was the combination of all these advanced systems in one vehicle. The radar equipment was bulky, expensive, and unreliable with 1950s technology. The bubble canopy would have been unbearably hot in summer despite the climate control system. The sliding doors added complexity and potential failure points. The exotic positioning of the exhaust system would have created unusual maintenance requirements. The overall height and proportions made the car unsuitable for normal parking spaces or garages. The cultural significance of the Cyclone extended far beyond its technological features. As Harley Earl's final major concept, it represented the culmination of his design philosophy that cars should be rolling sculptures expressing American optimism about the future. The debut at Daytona International Speedway connected it with America's newest, most modern racing facility. It embodied the height of 1950s belief that technology could solve all problems and make life more exciting. The Cyclone influenced production Cadillac design for years afterward. Elements of its styling appeared in modified form on regular Cadillacs throughout the early 1960s. The radar technology concepts eventually became standard decades later as collision avoidance systems. Automatic climate control influenced production systems that appeared in luxury cars. Even the door mechanism concepts influenced later automotive design thinking. But in 1959, the Cyclone was simply too advanced and too impractical for real-world use. The radar system would have required constant maintenance and calibration. The bubble canopy system added weight, complexity, and potential failure points. The exotic styling made it impossible to park in normal spaces or drive on normal roads without attracting overwhelming attention. The cost of production would have been astronomical. In 1958, nuclear energy represented humanity's conquest over the physical world. Atomic power promised unlimited clean energy. Nuclear submarines explored the ocean depths, and scientists predicted atomic-powered aircraft, trains, and automobiles. Into this optimistic atomic age came the most radical transportation concept ever designed, the Simca Fulgur. Created by French designer Robert Opron for display at the 1959 Geneva Auto Show, the Fulgur was envisioned as the car of the year 2000. It would be powered by a nuclear reactor balanced on just 2 wheels by gyroscopes and controlled entirely by voice commands. It made absolutely no sense from any practical standpoint, but perfectly captured the atomic age's unlimited faith in nuclear technology. Robert Opron was already establishing himself as one of France's most innovative automotive designers. He would later create the famous Citroën SM and CX models, cars that redefined European automotive styling. But in 1958, Opron was given free rein to imagine transportation 40 years in the future. The Fulgur, whose Latin name means flash, or lightning, was his answer to what personal mobility might look like in the atomic age. The Fulgur's most radical feature was its proposed nuclear power system. Opron envisioned a miniaturized atomic reactor that would provide virtually unlimited range. Theoretical estimates suggested 8,000 kilometers or 5,000 miles before refueling. This represented the 1950s belief that nuclear technology could be miniaturized and made safe for consumer applications. The atomic reactor would be clean, quiet, and incredibly efficient compared to gasoline engines. Of course, the technical challenges of creating such a system were completely ignored in the excitement of atomic possibilities. The vehicle's most visually striking feature was its two-wheel design balanced by gyroscopes. Unlike conventional four-wheeled cars, the Fulgur would operate on just two wheels, but only at speeds over 150 kilometers per hour or 93 miles per hour. Below that speed, additional wheels would deploy for stability. The gyroscopic stabilization system would keep the vehicle upright and stable during high-speed operation, similar to concepts being explored for other futuristic transportation systems. This represented space-age thinking about vehicle dynamics and stability control. Opron designed the Fulgur to be completely autonomous, decades before such technology existed. The vehicle featured voice-controlled operation systems that would respond to spoken commands from the driver. Radar-guided navigation would plot courses and avoid obstacles automatically. An autopilot system would receive information from control towers, similar to aircraft navigation systems. These features represented early concepts of connected vehicle technology and artificial intelligence, neither of which existed in practical form in 1958. The Fulgur's appearance perfectly captured space-age design aesthetics. It resembled a cross between a small aircraft and a hovercraft, with a plastic bubble-top canopy providing visibility for occupants. The wheels were hidden beneath the streamlined body, enhancing the flying vehicle appearance. The entire design emphasized horizontal lines and smooth curves that suggested high-speed flight through the atmosphere. Despite its aircraft-like appearance, the Fulgur was never intended to actually fly. It was purely a ground vehicle with an aerodynamic design optimized for theoretical high-speed operation. What made the Fulgur completely impractical was the combination of multiple unproven technologies that didn't exist and wouldn't exist for decades. Nuclear reactor miniaturization was impossible with 1950s technology and would have required massive radiation shielding that would make the vehicle impossibly heavy. The gyroscopic stabilization system would have been complex, energy-intensive, and prone to failure. Voice control required computer technology and speech recognition capabilities that wouldn't be invented for another 30 years. Radar navigation needed infrastructure and satellite systems that didn't exist. The cultural significance of the Fulgur extended beyond its technological ambitions. It represented the French vision of atomic-powered transportation and showcased European approaches to concept car design. France was rapidly advancing its nuclear program in the 1950s and saw atomic energy as key to technological independence. The Fulgur embodied French confidence in nuclear technology and their belief that atomic power could revolutionize personal transportation. The Fulgur appeared at major auto shows including the 1959 Geneva Auto Show, the New York Auto Show, and the 1961 Chicago Auto Show. Public reaction was mixed. While visitors were fascinated by its radical design and atomic power concept, most recognized the complete impracticality of the vehicle. Automotive journalists praised Opron's creativity, while noting that the Fulgur represented ideas that were decades ahead of any possible implementation. Robert Opron's later work at Citroën showed continued futuristic thinking, though grounded in more practical considerations. His designs for the Citroën SM and CX incorporated advanced aerodynamics and innovative engineering solutions that were actually buildable. The French automotive industry continued its emphasis on innovative design, though nuclear power concepts were quietly abandoned as the realities of atomic energy became better understood. Compared to contemporary American concepts like the Ford Nucleon, the Fulgur was more radical and theoretical. While American designers created nuclear car concepts that resembled conventional automobiles with atomic power, Opron reimagined the entire concept of personal transportation. The Fulgur represented European theoretical approaches versus American practical concepts, showcasing different cultural attitudes toward technology integration and automotive design.